really interesting fine art photograph by Michael Belk entitled Denial. So what's going on here? Well, at the left-hand side of the screen, you see in the background, you have Jesus and a Roman centurion. So he's communicating to us that Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he was arrested in Gethsemane, and he's now in Caiaphas' house being interrogated. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see Peter, who's holding a rooster with a woman next to him. And he's already been told on that very night, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. So Belk's got us set up. That's what's going on. And notice his modern day clothes. In other words, this applies to you and I, even today. This Christ of old is relevant to you and I today. Look at his clothing. So what happened that night? Peter, the very person who was one of the few and the first to say, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Later on now, Christ has been arrested. And to acknowledge even knowing Christ meant that Peter could be arrested. Peter's around this fire at Caiaphas, the high priest house. Jesus is 2 or 3 floors up, being interrogated by the high priest. And Peter's sitting around this fire made of coals. The New Testament goes so far as to describe the kind of fire it was. And he opens his mouth probably, and his accent, his Galilean accent comes out, and all of a sudden they realize he's a Galilean, and then they make and he probably brought fish up there too from time to time. They recognize who he was, and they go, "Well, didn't you know this Christ?" And he goes, "No, I don't have any idea who he is." So 3 times this happened in the same night, and Peter's got to be just moving downward like, "I'm so embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I can't call myself a friend. Here my friend is, who I love, is arrested, and I'm denying I even know him." All right, so fast forward. Jesus is crucified not long after Gethsemane, as you know, and then he's risen from the dead, and he appeared to over 500 people. So one day, Christ is on the seashore of Galilee, and I've been to this shore there, just like I've been to Caiaphas' house. I've seen this courtyard where this all went down. There are 7 springs, warm water springs that come up in this area of the Sea of Galilee, and Peter's out there fishing, and Jesus is on the shore, resurrected from the dead, and he's making a fire. Guess what kind of fire it is? It's a coal fire, the very same kind of fire that Peter denied him around at Caiaphas' house. And Peter recognizes who it is. He throws off some of his garments, he gets in the water and just swims to shore, and there Christ is, cooking breakfast of all things. And they enter into this dialogue, and Christ asked him a question 3 times, once for every time that he's betrayed. "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" Christ wants to restore his relationship with Peter and help Peter to realize he is who he said he was originally, and it will always be that to Peter. But what Christ is most interested in is whether or not Peter loves him. He wants to know if he loves him, and he doesn't want to talk about the fact that he betrayed him. He just wants to know if he loves him. Very same thing God said to Adam. "Adam, where are you?" God wanting to know where you are in relationship to him, not what you've done. Please hear that. God is less interested in what you've done and more interested in where you are in relationship to him. So he asked Peter, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And they go through this whole reconciliation, reinstatement kind of thing on the beach. Notice what he didn't ask. "Peter, do you know about me? Peter, have you read about me? Peter, have you taken classes about me? Peter, have you sat in my churches? Peter, have you listened to sermons about me? Peter, have you read a book about me?" He didn't ask him any of that. And he's not asking you that either. Whether you know about him is different than whether you know him. Whether you've read about him is different than when you can talk with him and hear from him. If you've heard about him, is different than having a friendship with him. If you've been to church your whole life, doesn't mean necessarily that you know him. It doesn't. It has the appearance of that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you know one another. This is what Peter teaches us. We all have the ability and oftentimes the willingness to betray God, to reject God, to willfully reject God. But he'll come back to us time and time again and say, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? I want you to know more about me. I want you to love me. In fact, I will give you the love necessary to love me if you will allow me to be the Lord of your life." Oftentimes we don't love him because we don't have him. We haven't asked him to come inside of our hearts and our bodies to give us the love to love him with. He wants to do that. Maybe spending a lot of your time explaining away and debating and arguing who he is or who he said he is. But you haven't spent enough time answering that one question. Do you love me, and do you want to love me? And will you give me the love I need to love you? Now that's a God who cares about you. Let's think about that. Let's move from denial to acceptance and the reality of that friendship in our life. Well, there you go.